Hi, my name is Brett, and I just wanted to record a screencast showing how to create a simple Ruby gem with tests using Bundler to set it up and configure your gem. Bundler makes it really easy to get going with your code and sets up a lot of the scaffolding that you'll need. So the first step is, when you have Ruby installed, is to install Bundler if you don't have it already. Then when Bundler is installed, you can use the bundle gem command and then the name of your gem. I'm gonna call my gem Converty, and it's gonna be a way to easily convert different numbers between units. So for example, here we're gonna convert miles to kilometers and have a class that lets us easily do that. So I'm gonna type bundle gem converty, and that's gonna go and set everything up, and also initializes a Git repo and a license for your code, sets up Rubocop and a changelog. It's really, really incredible how much it sets up for you. Also, it automatically set up RSpec because I have that configured. The first time you run bundle gem, let's actually look at the help. You can pass in a bunch of options, which is really cool. So you can say whether or not to add certain files and which test framework you'd like to use, and even which CI you'd like to use, which I think is just really cool. If you look at my bundle config, see those gem dot settings. Those are for the different values. There's also some stuff in there that probably shouldn't be. Maybe I'll cut this out. If you run bundle config and you output that, that'll show you what you have configured if it's not your first time running the bundle gem command. So if we cd into the Converty directory, we can see everything that was created. I'm going to start up tmux, and we can open Vim and look at what was created. The first file to start with, I'd say, is the gem spec, which is short for gem specification. It outlines everything about your gem, from its name to the author to the versioning, basically everything that goes into rubygems.org or any gem host. It's populated by the gem spec, which is pretty cool. You can write a quick summary. I'd say something like, easily convert numbers between different units. I'm going to just put to do here. For the home page, this will likely live at github.com/bretchalupa/converty. And MIT is fine with me. You can specify which Ruby version is required, which is really great. If you're using Ruby functions and methods that are just to say features that are only available in certain Rubies, you can limit it here, which is really fantastic. Allowed push host. I think this might be something like rubygems.org. Not exactly sure about that yet, but also you can reference the other information here, which is cool. So you can do things like spec homepage plus, let's just say, changelog. That might not be exactly right, but I think it should be close enough. Gives you an executable, which is pretty neat too. We can add dependencies to our gem that it requires to make sure that it properly gets installed, but that's enough for the gem spec for now. Let's look at some other things. We've got a rake file that sets up Rubocop and RSpec. So when you run bundle exec rake, it runs Rubocop and runs RSpec, and you'll see Here we have an error where our gem spec's not valid. Fix me or to do is not a description. So let's go ahead and fix that. And we're already kind of like off to a start. So instead of to do, let's say require the Converty class and pass in a numerical value and the from and to units to easily convert a number between different measurement systems. Currently supports miles to kilometers. We'll just use that for now. Ideally, it would do more than distance. Maybe do volume, weight, all these different things. But for now, we'll just start with miles to kilometers. So if we write that and we bundle exec rake again, we'll see that certain things are installed. So we'll bundle install, which will install all of the gem dependencies that we need. So before we move on, let's take a look at those in the gem file. Source is rubygems.org, which is normal. It calls gemspec, which actually loads in these files from the gem specification. So it would, if you added a dependency here, like, I don't know, like active record or something like that, this would ensure that active record's installed. It installs rake, RSpec, and Rubocop, which is why we needed to bundle install. Now, if we do bundle exec rake, it runs them all. And you see we have a failing test. You can also do bundle exec Rubocop, which will run Rubocop, and we can see if there are any problems. Rubocop found unsupported Ruby version 2.4 and target Ruby version. So that's something to fix. Let's say we'll just change that to 2.5, and we'll change this to be also 2.5. I think that's reasonable. Oops. Let's run Rubocop again, make sure that works. Rubocop might fail, and that's okay. We should go ahead and fix those. Kind of in the weeds, but that's okay. We'll just do that and forget Ruby here doc long string. Let's look up Ruby here doc long string because I forget the syntax. Okay, you can do something like that, and then you can end it with that. That kind of looks like SQL though. So let's call it description. So that allows us to break this up in a way that Rubocop is happy with. Also, it makes it easier to read in Vet, which is nice. Okay, so we've got that. It didn't like the way we were taking these strings and adding them together with a plus sign. So it wants it instead to look like that. Let's run Rubocop, make sure it's fine with our changes. Description is not aligned with the beginning, so let's do this. See if it's okay with that. Use 2 spaces for indentation in a hairnet by using tilde. So if we do that, Rubocop has so many opinions, which is fine. So we get Rubocop passing, which is just nice to be working. There's also got some new cops, new things that it's checking, and it's suggesting rake in RSpec, but we're not going to worry about that yet. So if we run bundle exec rake, it fails on RSpec because bundler creates all that. But before we dig into that test, let's just keep working on the files that it creates. It creates a git ignore with common files ignored that we wouldn't want to include, which is really great. It creates an RSpec config, which you can change as wanted. It has the Robocop config, which is also nice. You can change that to your own desires. It has this changelog, which is rad. What else? Code of conduct that is based on this template from the contributor covenant at school. License MIT, you could change it as wanted. Oh yeah, it even gives you a README, which is cool. It tells you a bit about it and how to use it. Run bin setup, so it's even got some different bin files. Let's take a look at those. So it's got a console, which requires your gem and IRB, kind of like Rails console works. That's neat. And then it's got setup, which does bundle install. So we could have done that earlier, right? We could have done bin setup and run that directly. Let's do bin console. We have Converty. You can see what methods it has. Let's look at class methods. Maybe we don't have it yet. Anyways, let's go and let's start looking at some code. We have converty.rb, which has converty error, and we'll put some code there. It's also got this version, which is used to, you can reference in the code the version. Like, for example, you could, in here, you could reference converty version in different classes. I don't even know if you need the converty there. It might just work because we require relative. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's nice because it's dynamic, and then also in the gem spec gives us that there. So we only have to define it once and maintain that version in one place. So that is great. Let's get into that failing test. So we'll open a split and we'll see in the spec file, we have a spec helper, which just comes with the setup by default and gives us some basic configuration that we can adjust as needed, but it's probably good enough for now. And we've got our spec, which describes Converty. And look at this, it even says it has a version number, which that's important. And then it does something useful, which this is our entryway into our testing. So let's write some tests. Let's describe what I'm going to call the convert method to get started. I'm going to open up a pane here so we can quickly run our tests and kind of shuffle things around. So we've got this open, we've got this over here. I'm going to make it so we can run our tests over there. We're going to say it supports miles to kilometers. And then we'll say expect converty.convert. We'll say let's say 3.1, and then this, we're designing the API, which that's a big part of writing Ruby gems and different library code. And this may not be the best design, but we'll just go with it for the example. And we'll say from miles to kilometers. And we'll say to equal 5.0. Maybe that math might not be exact. We might need some rounding, but that's what we can start with. And I have it set up so that we can quickly run the tests on the right side of this tmux pane. And what it's doing is it's calling bundle exec RSpec to the path to that test that I wrote. So however you run your tests, that's the command. I'll just type it out really quick too. One looks like RSpec spec, and then it ran Converty spec. And then you could run a specific test by appending :9 with RSpec. So we have our first failing test, undefined method convert for the module. Let's change that and run that again. Wrong number of arguments, given 2, expected 0. So let's fix that. We'll call it, we'll call the first one amount, or we'll call it maybe like number, or like when you have 5 kilometers, what's the 5 called? I guess it's called the distance. We'll just go with amount for now. And we'll have a named arg from, and we'll have a to arg that's also named. So now if we run that, we get nil back instead of 5.0. Now, this is like where test TDD gets goofy, but we can make all this green by just returning 5.0, which then gets us to write our next test that's failing that will help drive out the code. So we'll say it supports kilometers to miles. And we'll do a 5 kilometer to miles, which I think is 3.1, but we'll figure that out. So now we're failing, and that is what we want. We can now actually like write some real Ruby code, and we're backed by tests that will help cover it. Let's think about how we want to do it. I think the first thing we could do is case from when miles, when kilometers. When miles, this gets funny pretty quick, but we can say when miles to kilometers, take the amount and multiply it by, I have this number in my notes. This is the conversion formula. So when we go from miles to kilometers, we take the amount and we multiply it times 1.6.9.0 or 1.609344. I wonder if there's going to be some rounding and if that's exact. That's something to look into and investigate. But let's start with our failing test here. So we have some rounding errors, which I think is expected. Let's figure that out in a second differently. Let's start with 5 kilometers to miles, and we'll use that to drive out the 3.1 that we pass in the other one, because I'm not exactly sure about it. So we'll do that, but we'll divide it, and we'll see what we get. So that gives us a rounded number. I don't know if it's repeating, but it's like got a ton of decimals, which generally we'd have some rounding, which maybe we have some options in the gem for rounding. But for now, let's see what we do if we call round 2. Let's see what that returns in Ruby. 3.11. Let's round it to 1 decimal place for now. So 5 kilometers to miles rounded to 1 is 3.1. If we take 3.1 from miles to kilometers and we round it to 1, maybe that will pass too. Yep, that passed. So if we run them all, they will work. The rounding is interesting in that it's not precise, and maybe we want to work with precision, or maybe we want to have an option for more precision. But for now, I think this works, illustrates the point. Let's refactor a bit. I think the best place to put this, or the next change I'd like to make, is have this 1.609344 amount, and I want to call that like miles to kilometers. which I don't know if that would be considered a ratio, or I guess it's not a ratio, but what does it represent? It represents how many kilometers are in a mile. Kilometers per mile. Let's change it to kilometers per mile. I like that name more. We'll take that, replace it here. Now it's in one place, which just makes it more clear and gives us a nice single place to maintain that. Run the tests again. It passes because I used the wrong constant name. So we'll run that. That passes. Let's also run Robocop just to see if it has any qualms with what we're doing. It sure does. Method has too many lines, missing top-level module documentation comment. Yeah, too many lines is interesting. We'll just call the Converty class easily convert amounts between different units. We'll give this a documentation too. Convert the specified amount in the from unit to the to unit. The pluses here will render it in different places as code, and then we can even provide some examples. So we could say something like converty.convert 5 from kilometers to miles. And maybe that just needs to be like that. We can say that outputs 3. Maybe the rounding becomes a parameter, but we'll just do this for now. So that gives us some documentation. Let's figure out how to handle. I'm not actually worried about the length of this function. Anyway, sorry, in the weeds of Robocop. But we have that passing. We made that refactor. We've got Converty working. It's really simple. Let's use this like we would in a different file, like in a different project. We can run bin console, which automatically requires Converty. We can call converty.convert, and we'll get our errors. So we could say convert let's say 5 from kilometers to miles. And we have that, just like in our tests. And we can say, well, round 1, because that seems to be pretty common. If someone did a 50 kilometers, that's 31.1 miles. Oh yeah, that's just 10 times more. That's not that it's not that interesting. We'll do 100 kilometers, that's 61.1. Another common distance would be like 15K. So that's 9.3 miles. And then let's say you had a Rails project or a Ruby project, you could require Converty, and in your code, call out to it. From there, or from here, you could take your code. I think the first thing would be to commit it. So let's actually commit what we've done so far. I like tracking the gem file lock because that will have the detailed versions of what's exact versions are being required in the gem file. So we'll keep that in there. Maybe for a gem file, maybe you wouldn't want it, but I think for our case right now, it's fine. And what I'm going to say is initialize new gem for that first one. Done using bundle gem converter. And then we can add the files that we've changed, which is, let's reset head on label spec, and let's say we've got fill out details of gem spec. Specifies more modern Ruby version, and what else has changed? Adds details about the gem. Then we can go and add our code ticket. Okay, simple commit. We've got that all made. Now here's something I want to show, which is the building of the gem. When you install Ruby, it includes the Ruby gems, which allows you to work and manage your gems, which you could then push to a different gem host like rubygems.org or your own private server or a different host. You can call gem and there's going to be different commands. So if you do gem.help, you can see what we have. So we could do gem build converty.gemspec. This builds the gem with the version based upon the code that is currently present when you run that command. So now if we ls, you'll see converty.gem, converty-0.1.0.gem, which is our file. It's our code packaged up. Then you can do gem install converty, and that will install it within Ruby on your machine. And then elsewhere you can reference it, which is super cool. I'll show you that in a second, but gem commands, there are some other gem commands too that you could use, like for pushing to rubygems.org and different places. Like here, if we do gem help platforms, let's see what that does. Well, let's do gem help commands. That will give us all the commands. You can see sign in to any gem cutter compatible host, defaults to rubygems.org. You can push a gem up to the gem server, which is nice. That's then publish it for others to use. And then if in their gem file they did gem converty and then did bundle install, that will install it. So based upon whatever the source is here. So that's really cool. I'm not going to publish this yet because I'm not ready for it. But that is a first look at what we have with Converty. But I do want to show you something neat, which is like if I open IRB, Ruby's console, and I require Converty because we did that gem install with the path to the local gem file, we have it now accessible on my machine, which is cool. So we can do the convert, and let's do 3.1 from miles to kilometers. We can add 1, we get the 5K. That is how we have it present. Let's see if there's a way to list out gems. So if we do gem list, that lists them out, and if we grep for converty, you'll see that that gem is installed locally. And it's not coming from the source in that directory, it's coming from the installed gem file. That's a first look at what it's like to create your own Ruby gem, drive it out with some tests, and package it up to then do what you want with it. I think it could be neat to share more about driving out this with tests. Different ideas would be making a command line tool that lets you convert files from the command line, doing something like converty 10 from miles to kilometers. That could be the API. It could be maybe it's something different. That could be cool. That'd be really neat to test drive out. Figuring out how to refactor this code so that it's less of these like case statements and making it more generic and having better design, that would be really cool. Pushing it up to rubygems.org could be helpful to demonstrate. So I think more to come, but this is a good little first look at it, and hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll do whatever I can to try to help you out. All right, thanks.